Family Guy has shown a lot of random violence and deaths over the years. While seeing someone killed off in a cutaway gag isn't uncommon, there have been a few times where the end of a character had a tangible impact on the show. Today, we want to tackle which of these deaths was most brutal. I'm Caleb with Wicked Binge, and this is Family Guy Deaths Gruesome to Most Gruesome. For this list, we'll be covering the deaths of characters that had an impact on the other characters, either because the people who died were longtime members of the cast or because the character had a dramatic effect on a single episode. First on our list, we'll be covering the deaths that occurred off-screen and the instant deaths. Gold medal of the least gruesome death goes to Mayor West. It's been confirmed that Mayor West was killed off in the series, which makes sense as the actor who played him, Adam West, passed away in 2017. However, there was never an official cause of death for the character given. The silver medal of least gruesome death goes to Stewie's bear, Rupert. Rupert wasn't a sentient being, so we placed him as one of the least gruesome. But while Rupert wasn't real, Stewie's reaction to his demise was. Seeing him torn apart with the remains of stuffing around Brian's mouth was traumatic for the baby and earned Rupert's death the silver medal. The bronze medal of least gruesome end goes to Brian's mother, Biscuit. In an early season of the show, Brian had struggled with his identity and the fact he felt abandoned by his mother. To get some closure, he decided to go and confront her, only to find she had passed away. Though Biscuit was said to have met a peaceful end, we ranked her third for how Brian reacted to seeing her stuffed. Like Rupert, her death's impact on another character is what got her a slightly more gruesome ranking. Following is one of Brian's former love interests, Pearl Burton. Pearl had spent years of her life as a shut-in. After Brian convinced her to finally go out and experience the outside world again, Pearl is quickly hit by a passing vehicle. Pearl was rushed to the hospital where Brian gave her a peaceful death by letting Pearl experience a life they could have together. Thanks to being immersed in a virtual world, Pearl's death was a happy one. Next up is Lois's Aunt Marguerite. We didn't even get to hear her voice before she literally dropped dead in the doorway of the Griffin's home. But we had to include her on this list since her death led to the Griffins experiencing life in a wealthy neighborhood. Taking our next spot is Glenn's ex-wife, Joan Quagmire. Joan had threatened to take her own life after Glenn implied he thought their marriage was a mistake.
I love you too, insane woman I'm having second thoughts about.
However, Joan didn't precisely die in her own hands, though it was by her own actions. After Glenn was exposed to have faked his own death, the Grim Reaper insisted he had to take Glenn with him anyway. Joan leapt to protect her husband, grabbing Death's arm and dropping like a sack of doorknobs. Following is Peter's mother, Thelma Griffin. After Peter had a horrible day at work, he arrived home to his friends and family, informing him his mother had passed away due to a stroke. Thelma wasn't present for many episodes, and unlike her husband Francis, we didn't actually see her die, so we had to place her as one of our least gruesome deaths. After Thelma is her former friend and neighbor, Evelyn. After meeting the family at Thelma's apartment following the funeral, Evelyn quickly liked Peter. Their relationship began on innocent terms but quickly spiraled into something disturbing as Evelyn took advantage of Peter's emotional state. In the end, the two reconciled with a hug, resulting in Peter using too much strength and snapping Evelyn's back. She died within a matter of seconds before being left behind at the graveyard. Next up, we have the employee from the cruise, Chad. Meg had a few relationships throughout the show, but her time with Chad was incredibly short-lived. As the boat the family was taking their vacation on began to sink below the water, Chad was one of the many people to die. He died quickly in the chaos, having been decapitated by an oar. Our last ranking in this section goes to New Brian. When the family noticed Brian's age, they decided to get another dog to make Brian's eventual passing easier.
Brian's getting old.
New Brian was well liked by most of the family. Stewie confronted New Brian about his dislike for the canine. When New Brian commented on how much Rupert liked him, Stewie snapped. We don't get to see how Stewie killed New Brian, but we get a nice view of a bloody garbage bag. The note read by the family afterwards implied he was shot and chopped off. Since we didn't see it, we had to place it as a low-ranking death. Our next section covers those who died from getting shot, though they weren't always done with a gun. Our first ranking in this section goes to the piano gag guys, Johnny and Vern. After everyone became exhausted seeing the piano guys show up, the writers decided to have Johnny and Vern killed off. As they began playing their signature tune, Stewie appeared on screen and shot them. Next on our list is the Man in White. The Man in White had been unsuccessful in dying with his cult. The Man in White followed Meg and Peter to their home where they were preparing for Stewie's first birthday. As he entered the Griffin home, the Man in White was hunted down by Stewie, who mistook him as the doctor that pulled him from the womb. Stewie ambushed the man and shot him with a laser gun. Our next spot goes to Prince Faisal. When Meg was declared missing, Brian and Stewie made their way to Paris to find her. Meg was sold off to the highest bidder at an underground auction, but oddly, she almost had a happy ending. The man she was promised to, Prince Faisal, had just declared he wished to marry Meg when Brian and Stewie busted in. Without sparing a moment, they shot him and wiped Meg's memory of the incident. Ranking after Faisal, we have Quagmire's ex-girlfriend, Stephanie. As everyone speculated why James Woods invited them to his mansion outside Quahog, Stephanie offered to sit in James' seat to pick up on his energy. Unfortunately, she wound up sitting in the line of fire of a hidden gun and took a fatal shot. Following is Tom's former co-anchor, Diane Simmons. They had all endured a night of terror, but that didn't mean everyone was safe. Lois was about to connect the dots as to who was behind all the murders. However, she was led outside by Diane, who was ready to shoot her and dispose of the body in the water. But before Diane could silence Lois, she was assassinated by Stewie. Our next spot goes to Stewie's brother, Bertram. To finally kill Stewie, Bertram had traveled back in time to get rid of Leonardo da Vinci. He had been successful in killing off the artist, but was quickly killed himself. Stewie had managed to shoot Bertram in the head with a crossbow, ending his life.
That was dramatic.
Following, we have those that died from getting stabbed. First up is Doug the Pimple. When Chris began down the slippery slope of becoming a troublemaker, he tried standing up against Doug. Doug proved to be able to reach into Chris's brain, making Chris punch himself in the face. Chris then has to trick Doug into going to the doctor, where he gets a shot of acne medicine. Next on our list is James Woods. After turning against Diane, she plotted to get him shot. James had been able to escape that first murder attempt, but couldn't escape being stabbed by Diane. We know James shows up again in the series, having been revived. However, we had to include him since he was dead for a significant amount of time. Another casualty of Diane's murder spree is Muriel Goldman. Like James, Muriel wasn't quick enough to escape the former news anchor. Muriel wasn't meant to be a victim of Diane's rage, but her fate was sealed after she came across Diane planting evidence. Finally, we have James's girlfriend, Priscilla. Priscilla had initially fainted at the chaos but came to at the worst possible time. She regained consciousness just as Diane was finishing off James. She was grabbed as she tried to flee, also being stabbed to death by Diane. Next up, we have those that met their end by being bludgeoned. Our next mention goes to the former bartender, Horace. During a softball game, Horace ends up in the line of fire as Jerome is up to bat. The softball smacks Horace in the head, killing him on the field in front of everyone. An unfortunate target to Diane's wrath. Next, we have Derek. Being the only one to get a faint signal on his cell phone, Derek headed to the roof of the mansion to try and call for help. He was soon followed by Diane, who used one of James's many trophies to knock Derek out. After getting cracked across the face, Derek fell to the ground below. We're now going into those that spent their final moments falling to their doom. This part goes to those that fell. First in this section is Cleveland's ex-wife, Loretta. While Cleveland fell dozens of times during Peter's reckless adventures, Loretta wasn't so lucky. After Peter wrecked the entire front half of the Brown home, Loretta slid to the ground in the tub, breaking her neck. Next up, we have the puppet shop owner, Franz Gutentag, formerly known as Franz Schlicknacht. After Herbert found Chris and Peter in Franz's basement, he confronted the former Nazi guard. After a prolonged and awkward fight, Franz and Herbert made it to the front porch. Franz wound up losing his footing and falling, his body breaking after hitting the cement. Next on our list, we have those that were strangled or suffocated. First up is Peter's former boss at the toy factory, Mr. Weed. To get more recognition at work, Peter invited Mr. Weave to his home for dinner.
Hello, Peter. How are you?
Unfortunately, just as Mr. Weave gave Peter good news, he began choking on a dinner roll. He was unable to be saved and died in the Griffin's home. Next up, we have two groups of people who met the same fate, the campers and other fat people. The first group was killed at the hands of Lois's brother Patrick. After being released from the Brookfield Insane Asylum, Patrick began strangling numerous overweight people to deal with the trauma he faced as a child. Years later, a similar act was carried out by Charles Yamamoto. Charles followed Chris to a fat camp after Chris had bested him in a hot dog eating contest. He began killing children, mistaking them for Chris. Our next spot goes to Jake. In an early season, Stewie falls for his babysitter. When he finds out she is already seeing someone, Stewie plans to get the boyfriend out of the way. He ambushed Jake and threw him in the trunk of a car. After Layden is relieved as a babysitter, Stewie remembers leaving Jake in the trunk to suffocate. Still, it was far too late to save the boy. This next section covers those that were killed by becoming crushed. We finally have Peter's other parent, Francis. While trying to entertain at Meg's birthday party, Peter tried various tricks as he took the role of a clown. Even though pulling the dozens of scars from his mouth went horribly, Peter still attempted to be the best party clown he could be by attempting a unicycle trick down the stairs. Unsurprisingly, this did not work out. Peter wound up breaking the rail of the stairs and falling on top of his father, who later died at the hospital. We have another character later revived for this spot, the family dog, Brian. After finding a street hockey set at the local dump and bringing it home, Brian wound up in the middle of the road, too preoccupied to pay attention. Without much chance for warning, Brian was crushed under a speeding vehicle. As the scene played out, we got a clear view of Brian's body becoming twisted and mangled. Though the vet could set Brian's limbs into place, they hadn't been able to save him. We then got a tearful goodbye as Brian died, knowing full well he wouldn't make it. Thankfully, Brian was able to be saved sometime later by Stewie, who was able to time travel thanks to Vinny's help.
Stu S.A. Stu S.A.
Our last character that was crushed was Brenda's abusive boyfriend, Jeff. After Glenn had a near-death experience, his sister Brenda showed up to stay with him. Of course, that also meant that her boyfriend was with her. Several days followed in which Glenn and his friends overheard Brenda being abused physically and emotionally by Jeff. It finally reached the point where Glenn couldn't tolerate seeing his sister suffering anymore. He lured Jeff into the woods using the excuse that they were having a guys' weekend. Jeff had gotten the upper hand, able to catch Glenn off guard and nearly choke him to death. Just as Jeff was ready to leave Glenn for dead, Jeff found himself unable to escape. Glenn had managed to regain consciousness, driving his car straight towards Jeff, crushing the abusive man between the car and a tree. Our final section is those that died through a more tortured end, being tormented physically and mentally as they died. First up, we have the murderer and hot dog champion Charles Yamamoto. After several failed attempts to murder Chris, Charles had finally managed to hunt down the middle griffin to his home, but Charles was still unsuccessful in killing Chris. After encountering Stewie, Charles was shown the cover to Queen's album News of the World. The cover art scared him to the point that Charles had a heart attack. Our following ranking goes to another employer of Peter, Angela. Like with Mayor Adam West, we aren't showing Angela's death even though it is confirmed multiple times that she is dead. During Peter's eulogy, he makes the comment that Angela died due to having cramps while swimming. But Peter isn't always known for having his facts straight. Still, since we were never given any contradicting information, we had to rank Angela's death based on that single comment. If that was true, that would mean Angela would have endured a lot of pain and fear before finally succumbing to drowning. Next up is the school psychologist Stewie visited, Dr. Cecil Pritchfield. This man only appeared for a single episode, but since the entire episode only took place in one location between two characters, it made a lasting impression. Though Cecil was able to help Stewie make a lot of realizations about himself, this wound up being a part of his downfall. Cecil wound up learning far too much about the homicidal infant. When he began suffering from a heart attack, he was unable to reach his medication. Cecil had pleaded with Stewie to help him, and when that wasn't working, Cecil tried calling for help from his assistant who couldn't hear him. Knowing his fate was sealed, Cecil then decided to spend his last moments mourning leaving his husband. Far down the list from their leader, we finally have the Cult Kids. Shortly after we're introduced to these brainwashed kids, we see one of the girls mixing the punch. Several different things were thrown into the mix, including rat poison and pills. After everyone received their drinks, we hear all the bodies falling to the floor, implying that they died almost instantly. We place them in this section because of all the suffering these kids endured as they were programmed to follow this cult's practice. Obviously, everyone involved in the mass suicide was aware that their deaths were going to be the end result. We hate to think about what these kids endured to be led to the mindset that this was an acceptable end to have. The bronze medal of most gruesome goes to Michael Pulaski. Known around the school as Mental Mike, he quickly targeted Meg after she accidentally got some food on his jacket. Unable to avoid fighting Mike, Meg trained with Glenn to hold her own in the confrontation. Just when it looked like Mike was going to finish her off and win, Meg pulled out her trump card. Mike was quickly subdued after Meg popped a pimple at him, leading to his guard being lowered enough for Meg to melt his face by revealing her bare torso. The whole time Mike was melting, he could be heard yelling in pain, leaving us to imagine how much pain he was in as he turned into a puddle of nothing. Taking this silver medal of most gruesome death, we have Bitch Stewie and Bitch Brian. Like with Mike, these two wound up becoming piles of decayed and melting flesh. But unlike Mike, their deaths were played off as much as a gag. Mike's death had been an apparent reference, but it came as a shock when Brian's copy's jaw fell off. Brian's copy had mentioned that he was in pain and could not feel parts of his body before his jaw literally hit the floor. Shortly after, Stewie's copy comes in and also mentions hearing nothing but rushing water before the two of them disintegrated. The fact that these two were aware of their impending doom to an extent made seeing them dissolve into a disgusting mess all the more disturbing. Finally, the gold medal of most gruesome goes to Ben Fishman. After they had dinner with the Fishmans, who loved to brag about their many accomplishments, the Griffins decided to take on the challenge of climbing Mount Everest.
You guys, we're climbing Mount Everest.
During a storm, the Griffin family came across the body of Ben Fishman, who had frozen to death. When Ben is found, he is sitting by himself, his eyes wide open with fear and clearly trying to maintain warmth. There was no doubt looking at him that he had tried calling for help after falling behind his parents on the trail. For this reason, we had to place his death as the most somber and gruesome of the series so far. But let us know in the comments section if you agree with our ranking, and tell us what we should cover next. Remember to hit that notification bell and binge our most gruesome playlist, where we break down the most gruesome moments in your favorite cartoons, shows, and movies. But most importantly, stay wicked.